This is Your Pain Game podcast, where we talk about the game of living in and with chronic pain and trauma, getting to the heart of how to heal. I am your host, Lindsay Soprano. On this show, I plan on discussing with doctors, chronic pain patients, holistic practitioners, loved ones, and anybody that is interested in having their voice heard in the chronic pain and trauma world that we live in. So I don't know about you guys, but every single day of my life lately, I feel like I'm shouting out loud, like I need a freaking vacation, far too many times to count. It feels like lately. And even when my sweetie and I do go on a vacation, it's like go, 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 go the entire time for almost 3 weeks, no downtime whatsoever. So we talk about wanting to go on vacations. We talk about wanting to escape, right? I mean, we all have our days, our weeks, even months. Who knows, maybe even years of wanting to escape our personal realities. And one of the things that my question is in regards to that is, why is life a place that we feel like we need to escape from it as much as we do? And sometimes I'm not even sure what my reality is. On some days, I feel so topsy-turvy all the time with my bod and the silly day-to-day adulting shit that we have to do. My sweetie running my marketing agency, doing this show, our dogs, my health, his health, everything. It all just snowballs. And I don't even have any children. Never ending. And I'm exhausted. And I'm tired of being exhausted. I'm tired of talking about being exhausted. And I do know that I need to take a break here and there. I need to be better about self-care. And I do need that escape. But it just makes me question why I so badly want it. And I think that part of it is that I'm hungry to be a part of something that's a little bit bigger than just me. And I'm frustrated with being smaller than I thought I would be at this point in my life. I had anticipated being much different than I am today, on stage and being an opera singer and traveling around the world and doing these wonderful things. And here I am now stuck half of my life in a wheelchair doing a podcast. And I love this show more than anything. But I'm in this place right now where I kind of feel like I need a little bit of a life escape. I need a little bit of runaway time. And I'm a little scared about that because I know when I get into those places, I tend to make some pretty willy-nilly decisions. And I want to be something larger than I am. I want to contribute more to the people that come into my life and the people that are on this earth. It's one of the reasons I started this show. It's why I'm working on a book. It's why I'm working on TED Talks. It's why I'm working on eliminating more unhealthy people and stressors from my life, and working on removing obstacles and addictions. And one of mine is that I am such a control freak and OCD. And then also taming the alcohol beast that is in my life, because I know that I use it to cope with pain and past trauma. And addiction is obviously one of the many ways that we escape massively. And we all need to be honest with ourselves about addiction, because addiction isn't just about drugs and alcohol. It's about food, it's money and gambling, it's religion, it's exercise, it's sex and porn and more. We all have something. So if you start pointing the finger at other people, you might want to start pointing it towards yourself and take a little bit of a beat and figure out where some of that escapism might be coming from and these addictions that we have in our lives, and maybe assess a little bit more as to where they're coming from. And I know for me, my OCD and alcohol addiction has come from childhood trauma, and it eked its twisted way into the fabric of my being, of who I was and who I am. And at the rate I'm going, it will continue to be in the who I'm going to be in the future, right? And so that escape and that freedom can come in the form of addiction, right? And I understand addiction from an anxiety and coping mechanism and from a trauma perspective. And so does my guest today. So without further ado, and I know there's a little lengthy opener here today. I just kind of started going on a tangent about addiction. But anyways, I'd like to introduce you to my guest today, Dylan Lundgren. Hey, Dylan, how are you?
I'm doing well, Lindsay. Thank you for asking. It's good to be here.
It's good to see you again. Dylan is a TEDx speaker and addiction recovery advocate who works with individuals and organizations to increase engagement in the addiction recovery process. So I'm going to roll out the red carpet for you. And I'd like to start talking with you about how you got started with your addiction and where you are today. And we'll kind of fill in everything in between because you've got a pretty incredible story.
Thank you. Yeah. So how did I get started with my addiction? That's a great question.
Yeah, I know. And it's loaded.
Yeah. There's, because it's not just one thing really that led to my addiction. It was kind of a combination of different things. So I grew up and was a scholar athlete in high school. And I was convinced that I would probably never pick up drugs and might never drink. And the reason for that was because I saw what alcohol did to my grandfather a little bit, and drugs with some of my friends. And I just, and the idea that I would be out of control, I didn't like that, that the substance would make me out of control. The problem was that I had this deep inability to feel okay in my own skin, this deep inability to deal with life, especially going into college and as responsibilities increase. And growing up, I just had this really deep inability to deal and to feel okay. And so in college, when I had my first drink, it was almost like everything that I had been trying to achieve through good grades and through sports, and alcohol actually gave me that. I thought that if I got the good grades and I was captain of the wrestling team or state champion wrestler or whatever, if I could achieve those things, some of which I did, some of which I didn't. But regardless, I thought if I could just do that, I would be good enough, and that never worked. Yet when I picked up a drink for the first time, I felt good enough. My mind quieted down. My the ability to kind of handle life. It worked for a little bit. To be fair, it really did. It worked for a little bit, but it's a maladaptive coping mechanism. It doesn't stay that way, right? So I need more to achieve the same effect, and then eventually it doesn't work at all. But now I'm addicted, so it just spirals downhill from there. But that's kind of how it started. It was like I wasn't looking to feel okay necessarily through alcohol. I just happened to pick up a drink and then realize that that's what it did for me.
Yeah, it was your Red Bull. It gave you wings.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and I think for me, and some people would think, how is it possible that Lindsay doesn't have good self-esteem? She's always on top of things. She can always walk into a room and she's smiling and she's this and she's that. Oh my gosh, do I have self-esteem issues? And I always have. And for me, alcohol was one of those places that I could turn to that gave me more courage. As we all know, it does give you courage to say things that you would never really say, to do things that you probably would not do. And looking back at yourself and going, whoa, that was me doing those things under the guise of of vodka or whatever the concoction was of the evening that I was drinking back in the day. But so what happened for you? So you got into college, you started getting into the drinking drug scene. So what happened after that?
So I went to University of Connecticut for a year, which is where I had my first drink and started drinking. And even in hindsight, I could see there was a problem because I was starting to drink alone and stuff like that. I didn't pick up any drugs until after college. So it kind of spiraled from there. And there was some trauma thrown in there too. So when I left University of Connecticut after a year, moved back home and decided to pursue acting. And moving back home, I had an incident where I was assaulted by a gang, and that was a very traumatic thing for me. And I just decided, like, screw it, I'm going to start doing drugs. So I started smoking weed and taking acid and doing, all types of drugs. And it kind of spiraled from there. So I got arrested and had to do community service. And at community service, I learned about harder drugs. And it just, over the course of a few years, it went from, me having a drink at University of Connecticut to me now using crack cocaine and getting arrested all the time and losing jobs and ending up almost homeless.
I was going to ask about that, about the homelessness, if that ever came into play, because I've got a guest that's coming up as well who was homeless, and his story is like freaking insane.
Yeah, so I wasn't homeless, not necessarily living on the street, but there was a period of time where I was just staying on a couch here or there,
Yeah.
So it was that type of thing. And I lost pretty much every job I had. I lost due to my drinking or drug use.
Yeah. And from that, I know for me, I struggled with promiscuity issues, especially in college, because of the massive amount of drinking that I was doing. It was just part of like being in a sorority, you just be skanky and slutty and drunk. Is that just like, those are part of our Greek letters, right? And so did you have any issues in relation to porn and lust and sexuality and promiscuity? Did some of that stuff come into play in relation to your drinking and drug use?
For sure. I had grown up thinking that, I grew up idolizing guys who I don't know if they use this term anymore, at that period in time, they call them players. Right. So
you're aging us, darling.
Right. I know. Amazing. Yeah. So player was, the guy who would sleep around a lot, basically. And that was somebody who I idolized. But even then, I didn't really idolize that. What I idolized was what I thought it meant, So what I thought it meant was, worth, confidence, fun, like all these things that I projected onto this idea of sleeping around. Because I would see guys that were like that and they looked like they were having fun. They looked like they were confident. They looked like they were all the things that I really wanted for myself. But it wasn't so much that I wanted to sleep around. It was that I wanted these things I thought it would give me, right? Just like, I thought alcohol was giving me confidence. I thought, but it was really taking it away. And it was a similar thing with this. So I did struggle with that because when I did drink, I was able to be confident, at least have this false sense of confidence. And through that, I did sleep around. And then, some issues around masturbation, pornography did come up, but those actually came up in recovery from addiction. So I've had a few challenges.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, in sobriety where food and sex I had an unhealthy relationship to those in sobriety. And the reason why I had to take a look at them was because it was starting to lead me closer to relapse, to drugs and alcohol. Because our brain's always looking for a way out, right? Especially if we deal with trauma. If we have a history of trauma, early trauma especially. Our brain is always looking for a way to kind of deal with that, find a quick fix. And for me, it's a constant, I don't want to say battle, but it's a constant growing process to train myself to look for growth and healing rather than for the instant dopamine hit or the instant painkiller or whatever.
Yeah. And I mean, we all say it like at the end of our day, we're like, oh God, I need a drink. I mean, it is just it's part of our culture is the drinking culture. I mean, it's in every freaking advertisement that you thumb through. Every weekend is go out with the girls and go out for bottomless mimosas, which of course is one of my favorite things to do. But what we do is, and I'm in marketing, we market the awesomeness of being drunk. We market that to our children and to ourselves as adults. And we wonder why that is our first go-to coping mechanism. And then the second thing is sex, because we're all hopped up and sexy and we're drinking and our inhibitions are down. And next thing we know, we're banging some broad in the bathroom of the bar. I can say that because I've done it. And so, when you end up in these shady situations that are super unsafe, especially for women. And I love how you talked about the fact that, guys are the ones that look super cool and they look like they have their act together, and they've got women on the other hand, or girls when we're in high school and in college, we're skanks. We don't look like we're wonderful. We don't look like we've got it all together. We're slutty, even though we're the same person as the dude, if not less bad than the guy would be, right? So it's such an interesting thing how we've got these different roles that we play, even though we're doing the same exact behavior and we're participating in the same activities, but we're looked at totally different. And that then spirals you down, especially from my perspective. I can only speak for myself. It spiraled me down into more self-esteem issues. Because then it was compounding on top of another. And I was like, well, okay, that was last night. I'm over it. That walk of shame, right? Unfortunately, sounds like we both have done it. The walk of shame. And it is a shameful experience. And you do shame yourself and then you beat yourself up about it. And then what do? We just do it again because, we'll fix it the next time around. And that slippery slope, that cycle continues.
Totally.
And so when it comes to addiction, the pain that comes from it, because it's a very lonely place to be in addiction, no matter what addiction you're in. There was a gal that I talked to who was like a binge eater, just absolutely could not stop eating food, and the shame and the guilt that she experienced from that. You mentioned that you talked about having a bad relationship with food as well as porn. Can you talk a little bit about that in relation to food in regards to your care? Because you're talking about your sobriety and how the food and the porn part, or the food, porn, sex part kind of came in your sobriety. It's so interesting. Because you were, oh, great, I've got that part taken care of, but now I've got to glom onto something else. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's just the way my brain is. It's like, looking for the hit, looking for the fix. And so when early in sobriety, sugar became a drug for me. And it got so bad that it was like the part of my brain that wanted alcohol kind of was being lit up again. So when I would binge on sugar, I would just get these cravings to drink. I really want to drink. And it was like, okay. Because I wasn't having a little sugar. I was binge eating. I was gaining a lot. I was technically obese at that point. And so it was, creating a brain chemistry where it was like leading me back to relapse if I didn't address it. And so I really had to address it. And for me, addressing it means staying away from sugar and flour. Like I don't do either one of those.
So we got to keep you away from cakes and cookies, honey. Is that what we're saying? Well, it's true. Because like when I'll do I'm just not going to drink for a couple of months or whatever. I immediately am, and I'm not a sugar person, like a cookie sweet person at all. I'm not really salty or sweet, but that doesn't really matter. But anyway, when it comes to sweets, like, I'm just like, all right, if we're going out to, I have a thing with my girlfriends and everybody that goes out to dinner or lunch with me. I'm always celebrating somebody's birthday, even if it's not their birthday, because I believe that we all deserve free desserts in life, even if it's not our birthday.
Awesome.
So I always do this thing, and I've done it since I was in high school. But I'm like, I can kind of like have one little bite and I'm good. But man, if I don't have a glass of wine or something, I'll eat that entire piece of cake. So, okay. So how long ago did you sober up?
2004.
2004. Wow.
2004.
So you're like almost at the 20-year mark. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And a pretty easy path for you for 20 years, eh?
Yeah. I wish.
Yeah. So what have you been doing to stay sober? Did you have any relapses during this almost 20-year span of time? Did you almost slip up, or did you have any?
Close. I mean, there were times I was using things that I was like, do I change my sobriety date? Because of our relationship to certain things. But yeah, it was definitely not a straight shot upward. It was a very much 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And it's been, there are periods of time where it's been very fulfilling and very easy. There are other times when it's been extremely hard, and it's been everything that you could experience in life. I feel like that's what recovery really is. It's just being able to experience life in its fullest on both the negative and the positive side, or the painful or joyful side, and not having to pick up as a result.
So when it comes to your sobriety specifically, how did you get sober? Did you just like cold turkey one day and you went to an AA meeting, or how did you start on that path? And then what have you found to be really good ways to keep moving through the recovery process? Did you do any medication assisted treatment? Did you go in-house anywhere for like a 30-day clamp? Can you give us a little bit of that journey of how you got started on that and the components of a good foundation for recovery?
Yeah, for sure. So for me, it was 12-step meetings, and I go to a few different fellowships. And originally I had gone to 12-step meetings before, but I wasn't really ready to change yet. So, I was court ordered to get help. And,
ooh, do tell that story.
Yeah. So I got arrested numerous times and finally got to the point where I used up all my kind of get out of jail free cards. And then they're like, look, you got to get help or go to jail. So I'm like, fine, I'll get help. But even then, I still wasn't ready. So I'd go to the IOP that they suggested and I'd be high, or I'd go to a 12-step meeting, I'd be drunk. And so eventually, it was like I ended up getting arrested again, ended up going to Hartford Correctional in Connecticut. And at that point, for whatever reason, the idea of losing my freedom really did something psychologically to me. So I had overdosed. I had attempted suicide. Like, I had some pretty dark times prior to that moment, but I still wasn't willing to change, really. And for whatever reason, going to Hartford Correctional, the loss of freedom, like I said, did something psychologically where I wanted to actually change. So I went to rehab for the second time, and that's when I got sober. So going to rehab helped. It was a huge piece of it for me. And then along with rehab, they would bring us out to this 12-step meetings, and I would go to those meetings. And I got a sponsor and started working the 12 steps. And at the rehab, I was learning things like yoga and meditation, which I was incorporating on a regular basis. So kind of both of those were really important, the support group meetings, and then also this spiritual lifestyle of yoga and meditation, and starting to incorporate that into my life. Like, both of those were a good, very, very good foundation to start with.
Yeah. And I think that, everybody's got their own journey when it comes to addiction. My ex-husband, and I've spoken about him multiple times on this show, but he was a raging alcoholic, abusive man, and had been through massive childhood trauma when he was younger, which we came out later. And still never really dealt with it in a regard, like in a healthy way, from my perspective.
Mm-hmm.
He just stopped one day, just like, that was it.
Mm-hmm.
Went to one meeting. That was it. And from my understanding, he's still sober, but I do know that he's actually kind of like a meaner person than he was when he was drunk. Like, I'm like, I kind of want the drunk guy back.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I know is something that I've always thought about in my brain when I think about, I'm never going to have a drink again, or, whatever. I don't do drugs or anything like that. I mean, I do cannabis and THC for my pain in the evening, but I do love my red wine. But when it comes to like, what am I going to do when everybody else is drinking? Like, it's not fun anymore if you're not drinking, or it's not fun if you're not doing drugs. It's not fun with your friends you've got friends that are able to have a glass of wine instead of 2 bottles of wine. what do we say to people that are a little bit scared about not being able to have fun if they end up sobering up? Because I know that that is actually one, at least from my perspective, that is a scary thought to not have fun anymore because we've attributed fun with partying and going out and all that earlier, like what I was saying about the marketing, like everything's all about New Year's Eve parties and alcohol and, all of that. So it's possible to have fun without drugs and alcohol and porn, right?
Right. Yeah, it is. And most people, when they come to the point of debating whether or not to stop, it's because it hasn't been fun for a while. And so usually they're coming with some type of situation where it's like, this isn't doing what it used to do.
Yeah. I don't look really pretty in this outfit anymore.
Yeah.
Especially if my panties down around my ankles in a gross bar.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I know that you've done TED Talk and you do a lot of speaking engagements as well. Can we talk about what you're doing to help others now with your Mind, Body, Spirit program, what you're doing to help others in their journey towards recovery and how that's assisting you to stay sober for yourself? Because I assume that's pretty gratifying for you to help others. I know for me, doing this show in and of itself is gratifying to hopefully help other people with each episode that we do here.
Yeah, for sure. So I currently work with a company, consulting company. We help individuals and families. Usually they're struggling with some type of mental health or substance use challenge. And so they'll come to us looking for support and how to get help for usually a loved one. And what I do is help out using some of the practices that I learned early on, yoga and meditation, yoga and mindfulness. Is where I work with the clients on helping them to feel better and get through the initial stages of change or detox, and then helping them to rewire their brains so that they can live a new, better life. And sometimes we'll also do interventions. So if individuals come and they don't want help in a loving and caring way, we look at how can we use the social capital of the family or the social capital of their friends and loved ones to help this person see the potential in getting help. Because some people, they don't necessarily, they want to change, but they don't necessarily think it's possible. They don't see a way out. So they just kind of are resigned to this downward spiral of addiction.
Yeah.
Sometimes all they need is that kind of hit of hope rather than hit of dope, right? To be able,
you did not.
Yeah, I did it. to be able to see some potential there.
Hit of hope instead of dope.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. That's actually very well said. So, and I assume that, there are a lot of people that, like for me, for example, like if I was in this state where I needed to like get sobered up like big time, I know that I have friends and family around me that are very supportive of anything that would happen to me in my life, good, bad, or ugly. But I know that there aren't, not everybody has that support structure. And it sounds like you kind of step in and help with that if other people don't have that support, or at least help to bring the people that could be supportive for people to get through, to get sober, to help guide them in the right steps. Am I clear on that with what? Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's really neat because that's got to be gratifying for you too. And it helps you stay sober. Yeah.
It does. It's also, so there's two different pieces to that. One is that's what I do professionally. I work with a company, Feinberg Consulting, and we do this professionally. And it's very much coming from a place of being of service. It's not just about, making money. That being said, it's a business. And so it is what I do, what I get paid to do. And then the other side of the coin is my own recovery and working through 12-step meetings and a 12-step program. And so the beauty of that is you don't need money to go to a meeting. You don't need money to get a sponsor. Like that's one of the most beautiful things about a 12-step way of going about recovery is that you really don't need anything except a willingness to change. And if you have that, you can go pretty much every day, depending where you're physically located, you can go and get support every single day, without having to spend a dime.
Are you still going to meetings?
Oh yeah. Yep. I still go to meetings. Yeah.
Like every day?
Just about actually.
Really? Wow. Almost 20 years.
Yeah. And it waxes and wanes. So recently I've been increasing it because I realized it's something I needed to do just for my own mental health. But yeah, I still go to meetings.
Good for you. Because I know that there are the diehards AA people that are like, I've been here for 40 years, and they don't leave and they're going to die in an AA meeting. And then there are some that like get in there, they get their help, and then they're actually just rock stars and they find their own way of healing. Because I know, and I've been to AA meetings before, and I've been to Al-Anon meetings as well. And I did not find them to be very helpful for me, only because my personality type glommed onto everybody that was like me. And we ended up just going out and hanging out after meetings. And then that would end up not being something that was a good thing for us to do.
Yeah.
And so I know that there are people that have gone to like, oh, I went to a meeting, it wasn't for me. I would encourage you to go to find another meeting or find another meeting. Would you agree with that? Because not every meeting is not for everybody. Like we all are a little different. We find our little cliques, we find our groups, we find who touches our hearts, who pulls on our heartstrings, who's there that can help support. And also, I have a question in regards to getting a sponsor. When you get into AA, how do you actually glom on and find a sponsor within the AA program? How do you do that from your perspective, like the best way?
Yeah. So with any 12-step fellowship, it's, you want to find somebody, in my opinion, has what you want, right? It's like they have a certain way of going about life or a way of going about expressing themselves. There's something about them that you relate to, that you really would aspire to. Or maybe they share the same type of life struggles and challenges of addiction that you share. There's got to be some type of commonality there and something to aspire to. And so from that standpoint, I think it's good to reach out and just start to get to know somebody and see if it could be a good fit. And it's not going to be a good fit for everybody, but just like the meetings, you can't necessarily judge by one meeting, just like you
Right.
judge by one person. There's so many different people and sponsors available in different fellowships. You want to give it some time to really discern what could be a good fit and whether or not it is.
Yeah. And I think time is give yourself some grace and be patient with yourself, because with anything that you want to change, whether it's weight loss, whether it's getting through childhood trauma, whether it's putting on weight, which is what I'm trying to do, and be patient with our bods and our minds and our spirits and our souls, because nothing's going to turn around on a dime in one day, guys. I've got 45 years of stuff I've got to deal with here. Tomorrow, it's not going to all of a sudden be perfect, Linz, and it might not ever be.
It's the pain game, right?
It's the pain game. It sure is. And trauma is so painful. And the things that you've been through, and I know we didn't talk about a lot of them, and I know some of them we didn't want to cover, but I think that, well, for starters, congratulations on being almost 20 years sober. I mean, that's pretty awesome, because this guy is not some old rackety dude over here either. How old are you?
44.
44. That's right. We're the same age. So, so 20 years. I mean, for somebody to get sober when you're 24, 25 years old, that's pretty remarkable, because in your middle of your 20s, you're not thinking about sobriety. You're thinking about partying and going out and having fun and meeting a spouse and whatever. And so I give you massive kudos for doing that, especially in the middle of your 20s, because that's tough in and of itself. You got it. Yeah. And the willingness to change, like you said, I think is a huge component too. Like for me, my thing is I created this cute little disordered eating situation with my CRPS. And so now I'm dealing with food issues, and I didn't know that I was going to, but I am trying to be in this place. It's kind of how I started the beginning of this episode, where I felt like I was supposed to be something larger. I'm supposed to be bigger than I am. I mean, I'm always going to be this big personality type, but I feel like I don't want to be just a whisper. I want to be a storm. And I think that you are so encouraging in the willingness to change, because that is the number one thing. If you're not willing, then nothing's going to change. I mean, hello. It sounds simple.
Yeah. Simple and not easy.
Simple, but not easy. Yeah. I'm really proud of you. And thank you so much for spending the time that you have with us today. And I look forward to following you for the next 20 years to see what crazy shenanigans you get into.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thank you for bringing me on.
No problem. Thank you so much. You are exclusively invited to share this willingness to change VIP pain journey together. Let's get to the heart of how to heal with you by my side. Please follow the Pain Game podcast wherever you digest your podcast content. We will be there. And don't forget to give the show a review or two while you're at it. Visit us at thepaingamepodcast.com and follow us on all the socials. Thanks for listening, my little VIPs. Catch you on the other side.